the whole community in fear.
I can foresee somebody getting seriously hurt or even possibly killed at the end of the day.
It culminated in the desecration of a country churchyard and the theft of human remains.
It made me feel physically ill to think that somebody could do such a thing. It's beyond belief.
Tonight in the Money programme, we tell the inside story of the siege of Darley Oaks Farm. The Trent Valley in Staffordshire, a picture of rural tranquility. But as the sun goes down, people in these villages worry what the night may bring. They are under constant siege.
You just live in fear all the while. And you sort of hear every noise in the night. It doesn't matter what it is, you hear it. Just lie there listening.
They would come dressed in black with balaclavas, just slits for their eyes. And that was it. Just like terrorists.
Everybody seems to be frightened to speak out because they don't know what's going to happen, if they're going to be targeted next.
The man at the heart of the siege is John Hall. He owns and runs Darley Oaks Farm, a small family business in Newchurch, Staffordshire. The Hall family have been farmers for 3 generations.
Father started farming at Darley Oaks in the early 40s, and at that time it was just a small general farm with cows, some poultry and probably a little bit of arable.
In 1975, the Halls branched out and began what they thought would be a profitable new business, farming guinea pigs for scientific research.
Our operation is only really another branch of farming. It's rearing animals and looking after their welfare and selling the offspring to customers.
But that's not how others saw it.
On September the 2nd, 1999, the Animal Liberation Front raided Newchurch Guinea Pig Farm. Around 600 guinea pigs were rescued and are now in loving homes.
Animal rights activists claimed that this film, shot during the raid, showed guinea pigs were kept in appalling conditions at the farm.
Cannibalism is common. The Hall's own procedure manual includes the instructions to remove dead and dying guinea pigs on a daily basis.
The raid was just the beginning. Within days, sympathisers set up a campaign against the farm called Save the Newchurch Guinea Pigs.
We all know why we're here today. It's because in the farm just over there are hundreds, possibly thousands of guinea pigs, trapped in tiny, filthy pens.
These animals get sold into the vivisection industry where they're going to be mutilated and basically butchered to death for nothing more than profit.
I personally won't rest until I know that all those sheds are knocked down and they're not going to be used again.
John Hall admitted the Animal Liberation Front film was genuine, but he's always denied allegations of abuse.
It isn't surprising to me that there were some animals in there dead. You do get some stillbirths, and I think that that is something that anybody who has guinea pigs themselves as pets will have probably noticed. And it happens on a commercial farm the same as them. We are not breaking the law. So why should we have to kowtow to an unelected body of people to tell us what we can and what we can't do?
You've only got 3 officers in the field.
But the protests rapidly escalated, with attempts by activists to break in and occupy the farm. The Hall's business was under threat.
We wouldn't know when they were coming, we wouldn't know how many there were going to be, or indeed what they were going to do, because they didn't just stay on the side of the road as they were supposed to. They would walk up the drive, they would harass staff, and they would try to get into buildings, and we would have to take them back down to the bottom of the drive again.
As the protests continued, often several times a week, the Halls were forced to install heavy security measures to protect themselves. Then the campaign grew more sinister.
We were sent ransom notes where they cut pieces out of various magazines and glue them onto paper, saying that if we didn't close, I think it was by the 1st of April 2000, and then we were going to be burnt out.
Individual members of the Hall family began to receive abusive and threatening letters. Screw you and your fucking family. Hope you die the same painful death as your guinea pigs, and then burn in hell.
It is quite worrying when, they're prepared to go to that extreme.
But the Halls refused to submit, so animal rights activists then turned on the farm's employees.
I was awoken by alarms that somebody was on the premises. I'd look on the monitor, I could see 2 people had gone around. One had tipped something over the bonnet and down to one side, and they'd also put spray paint down it. And then somebody else had gone round with a screwdriver or something and stabbed each tyre on the car.
Simon Turner, the Hall's delivery driver, was also forced to install security measures to protect his wife and children from attack. But the nighttime visits continued.
I'd class them as terrorists. One, we can't sleep in our bed at night without fear of somebody coming and doing something to the house. What makes them any different?
And it wasn't just the farm workers who were attacked. Anyone connected with the Halls became a target. "67-year-old May Hudson had been working for the Hall family since 1997 as their cleaner.
I had paint bombs all over the house, all over the windows, the brickwork. Then came the bricks, smashing of the windows. I've had those 3 times, all smashed. I had a rag doll on the doorstep with a noose around its neck and a knife in the chest saying that this is me next. I've had all graffiti over the signs in the village and all up the common and all over the road saying that I was a murderer.
It's a horrible day. Damp and cold.
For May's daughter Jane, there was an added worry.
Are you going?
Her father was seriously ill at the time with cancer.
He was in bed and Again, a big crash in the middle of the night, and this brick came flying through, and it must have come through at such a force. It went right across the other side of the room, and you could actually see where it had impacted on the wall, where it had hit the wall. There was an indent on the wall, and it had landed right next to him on the pillow. I just kept thinking, if he'd have been sat up in bed at that point, and I'm sure it would have hit him, it would have killed him.
So I moved the bed so that the glass wouldn't hit him again. And within 2 weeks, they was back again and did exactly the same.
What's your opinion of the people who are doing this?
I can't explain what wicked people they are to do it.
John Hall was horrified by the attacks on his staff.
When you throw a brick, you don't ultimately know what the outcome of that could be. It could blind somebody the other side of the window, it could hit them on the head and even kill them. So I think you have to be a mindless thug to be able to do that. Because, we're not monsters. None of our staff are monsters. We're just ordinary people doing a job that admittedly some people don't like, but it's legal, and until it's not legal, we'll carry on with it.
Then activists went a step further. They began hitting companies that supplied the farm. Dove Fuels is run by Rod and Dot Harvey.
We started having phone calls. The phone calls got worse and worse and more abusive. And at times I was having 30, 40 phone calls a day.
And what would be said?
That we were effing animal abusers and murderers.
Shortly afterwards, protesters began to appear outside their home.
Come to speak to you about Newchurch Farm. We're giving you the chance to pull out before we start a big campaign of persistent regular demonstrations against you.
During 2003, the Harveys suffered repeated home visits and attacks on their property as they continued to supply the farm with heating oil. Then in October, they were the victims of a malicious smear campaign.
I was out driving when my wife rang and said, I've got the police here, there's a letter going round saying you're a paedophile. And so I said, you're joking.
Warning, known paedophile living in your street. Rodney Harvey is a convicted child sex offender. He's been convicted of inflicting violent abuse on children, attending youth darts matches run by his wife. These allegations were completely untrue.
I was so angry that it makes you feel that you want to kick, you want to shout, you want to do something, but there's nothing you can do, legally anyway.
Protesters outside the farm insisted they weren't involved in the violence and intimidation, but some were certainly prepared to endorse it.
I totally support it. All they've got to do is stop that cruelty and we will go away. We do not want to be here. We do not want to paint strip cars. I say we, because I'm not able to paint strip cars. But if I was young and healthy, I would quite happily do it. And I have no compunction whatsoever.
By mid-2003, it wasn't just the farm, but the entire community that was under siege.
They see graffiti on the roads, they see damage to road signs. These are idyllic villages in Middle England. they're not used to seeing that sort of activity. And quite obviously that intimidates and distresses the people that live there.
The village pub where John Hall used to drink was attacked, and the brewery asked him not to go back there. He was also a member of the local golf club, and that too was targeted during a weekend tournament.
You try and break my finger again, you bastard, and I'll have you!
A few days later, activists dug up the greens and daubed slogans on the grass.
I felt that I had to resign to protect the other members. It's not their problem that we breed animals for medical research, and I tendered my resignation from the club so that the other people hopefully wouldn't have their enjoyment damaged by the ALF.
In October, the campaign escalated alarmingly when a fire crew was called to a building on the farm.
As we made our way into the property, we became aware that there was large amounts of smoke and flames towards the top of the stairs.
At the top, they made a terrifying discovery.
And then that's when we located what was the large container of fuel with, there were several fire lighters, candles that were set as almost a trail towards it. It was obviously an arson attack. It would have been one large fireball, and it would have flashed over and come back down onto the crews below, and there would have been very, very little left of the property and the fire crews.
The police investigated the arson, but no one was charged. By the end of 2003, the campaign of intimidation had brought some victims to breaking point.
Well, that particular night, I was in bed. Rog stays down here quite late, and I was in bed, and I heard bricks come through the bay windows, and as I got out of bed to come down, I heard Rod shout. So when I came down, here he is, down here, in the hall, with a brick in his hand. It's hit his foot, his hand is cut and bleeding. And I've sent the brick through this, and it was a girl that did that.
Dot and Rod Harvey reluctantly decided to stop doing business with the Halls.
We've always said that we would not give in to blackmailers, terrorists, which is what I feel they are. But when it comes to the crunch and it's hit one of your family, of actually being hit by a house brick, then you think enough is enough. You can't take anymore.
The relentless targeting of employees, suppliers and their families was having a direct impact on John Hall's business.
Well, this is the cow shed that used to house 110 dairy cows in 2 groups. At milking time, they would be taken from this area through to the collecting area there and then through to the parlour. The shed's empty now because the people that used to contract for the dairy to take our liquid milk away for pasteurisation and that, they were targeted. They withdrew their transport from us, and we had no method of taking liquid milk to a dairy, and so we had to sell the cows.
And there was a further problem. Contractors wouldn't harvest any of his crops either, because their farm machinery had been sabotaged.
We're now probably unable to use 80+% of the farm for its rightful purposes. We've got to leave it fallow or make hay from it, which we wouldn't normally do.
The irony was that the Halls were now dependent on farming guinea pigs, the very business the protesters wanted to shut down. In early 2004, the victims were put under yet more pressure. The death threats became increasingly lurid. It culminated in a scene straight from a horror film. Voodoo dolls pierced with skewers and with daggers through their hearts were left outside several homes. But no one foresaw what happened next.
I shall never forget that morning. My mum phoned actually and she said, "You'll never guess what's happened now. They've dug Gladys up."
The remains of Gladys Hammond, the mother-in-law of Christopher Hall, John's brother, was stolen from the local churchyard. Her grave was wrecked and its headstone smashed.
To desecrate lovely Gladys's grave is an absolute outrage and just goes beyond belief, really. They call us scum, but I wonder if they really know the meaning of the word, because to do that is the lowest of the low.
The grave robbing provoked national outrage.
It made me feel physically ill to think that somebody could do such a thing. It's beyond belief. Beyond belief that anybody would even think of doing it, let alone doing it.
A group calling itself the Animal Rights Militia claimed it could be responsible. Staffordshire Police launched an investigation to track down the body snatchers. A week after the desecration, the police arrived at the Hudson's house. The family were in mourning for May's husband, who had lost his battle with cancer.
The police had got this letter saying that if my mum didn't finish within so long, it's the usual jargon, if you like, and that my dad would be next, which you can imagine. We'd only lost my dad not even 12 months at that stage, and the thoughts of somebody was thinking about coming to dig him up, let alone, it was just very, very stressful, very stressful.
That was a terrible, terrible shock to me. The police did say that they would be watching the grave for me, not to go up at night, and they watched it.
But the attack on the grave had an unexpected outcome. Local businessman Peter Clamp was one of many who attended a service of rededication at the church. He felt something had to be done.
I just feel so strongly about it. When I saw all those people, there's nearly 400 people in that graveyard. And if you stood there and watched it, and the emotions on people's faces, you yourselves would say, well, where are we living? Are we living in South America? Are we living in Iraq? Are we living in... No, we're living in England, in rural England. We're educated people. We're supposed to be intelligent people. Why do we have to have these people terrorising people who go about their lawful business? It's absolutely got to stop. And that's what I want to do, stop it.
Peter Clamp decided to take legal action against the activists. He wanted to limit protests outside the farm and protect the local community. But in taking a stand, Peter Clamp became a target himself.
I had one death threat on my mobile phone. How they got my mobile phone number, I'll never know, but that was very clever.
What did that say?
It gave a funny picture of an animal, and then it says, "We want to kill you."
Peter Clamp went to London to seek an injunction from the High Court. If granted, protests would be restricted to 1 day a week, and the community would be protected by a 27-square-mile exclusion zone. Any activist caught inside it would be committing a criminal offence and could face imprisonment. but it was already too late for some in Staffordshire. Simon Turner was forced to resign from the farm when the ALF began targeting his elderly parents.
I don't want them to have cars paint strippered, windows smashed and other things that are not very nice. So I've decided, in the interest of their safety, it's time to call it a day.
And then May Hudson's daughter Jane woke one morning to discover paint stripper had been poured over her car, and sinister threats were now being made against her young children.
I had a letter, and so did my brother, to say that if my mum didn't stop working for Halls within 7 days, then my address would go out, would be issued, and they wouldn't be responsible for what happened. And in this letter there was 3 pieces of yellow card, and it told me to display these in my children's bedroom windows.
With the safety of her grandchildren now in jeopardy, May Hudson had little choice but to resign as well.
Well, you try to carry on best you can. I've always wanted to work. Why shouldn't I? Why should I be stuck with these people? And they realised that they wouldn't stop me by targeting me, so they did the family.
In March this year, the High Court decided not to allow the exclusion zone. It was a setback for the villagers, but the protesters felt vindicated.
We're very pleased with the outcome of today's hearing. The claimants were basically trying to ban peaceful protests, and the judge has said that the peaceful protests should be allowed to continue.
However, the judge condemned attacks on the farm as a terrorist campaign and warned that if it did not stop, a wide exclusion zone would be imposed. Protesters still denied any involvement in the violence.
We can't speak for people who act outside the law, but I can say that those of us who are from the Save Newchurch Guinea Pig campaign will be acting within the law.
Peter Clamp vowed to fight on.
It's not over. We've not ended this saga, and they will overstep the mark. They will definitely overstep the mark because these people work outside the law.
Back in Staffordshire, the search continued for Gladys Hammond's remains. The police received a gruesome offer: the return of part of the remains if the Halls closed their farm. Villagers are trying to carry on as normal at their annual fete. In the past 2 years, they have endured 290 protests and 170 incidents of intimidation and violence. And there's no end in sight. In spite of this, John Hall and his family remain determined to keep their business going.
We're country people and we don't like being told what we should do and what we shouldn't, providing what we do is legal. And we do work within the confines of the rules and regulations. And if the animal rights people worked within the rules and regulations of peaceful protesting, I don't think we would have a problem with them. But they go beyond those legal limits and cause criminal damage and intimidation, which, quite frankly, in a civilised society is unacceptable.
It is now 9 months since the grave desecration. The campaign to close the farm continues, and the remains of Gladys Hammond have still not been recovered.
And that was the last in the present series. The Money programme returns in the autumn.